Hello and welcome. Coming to you live from our studio in Seoul, I'm Daniel Che for Arirang News. Let's start with the headlines. The long overdue Korea-Japan summit is set to take place, though unlikely that historical issues will be resolved during the meeting. Experts predict both sides will have much to gain from the talks. Korea's total industrial output spiked in September, expanding 2.4%, the largest growth in over 4 years. But a manufacturer sentiment survey reveals that businesses remain pessimistic. And China scraps its 3-decade-old one-child policy, but is it too late? President Park Geun-hye has reiterated calls for Japan to resolve the issue of its wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. She has told Japanese media outlets she wants the issue resolved before the year is up. Her remarks come a matter of days ahead of her first one-on-one with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
President Park wants the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women resolved by the end of this year. That's what she told Japanese dailies, the Asahi Shimbun and the Mainichi Shimbun, in a written interview. It's the first time the president has set a deadline on the issue, which has become the thorniest subject between the two neighbors. More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military before and during World War II. Time is running out for the elderly victims, as only 47 remain in Korea. President Park said it's important for the Japanese government to swiftly come up with measures acceptable to the victims, and that such measures will be proposed at the upcoming summit. She added that the past cannot be resolved by denial and expressed hope it will no longer stand in the way of their bilateral relations. Addressing Japan's newly acquired right to collective self-defense, President Park urged Tokyo to maintain transparent defense policies. There are concerns Japan's military could enter the Korean peninsula even without Seoul's consent in the event of a contingency with North Korea. She also touched upon Seoul's interest in joining the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, which includes Japan and the United States. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
THAAD is making noise again with rumors of talks on the possible deployment of the U.S. missile defense system during next week's defense talks with the United States. A Lockheed Martin official said the two allies had already started discussions on the matter, a claim Seoul vehemently denies. Connie Kim reports.
South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu made it clear there have been no consultations with the U.S. over a possible deployment of the THAAD system on the Korean peninsula. Han rejected a Lockheed Martin official's claims on Friday that Seoul and Washington are already in talks about deploying the defense firm's THAAD system in South Korea. The rebuttal comes after a senior official from Lockheed Martin said talks between South Korea and the United States had begun about the possible deployment.
The THAAD system is the subject of a policy discussion between the United States and the Republic of South Korea. Those policy discussions are ongoing now. I know they're having both informal and formal discussions on the policy side.
He also claimed it would be rational for a country like South Korea to have a multi-layered anti-ballistic missile defense system that includes THAAD systems. Talks of the potential deployment remains a highly controversial issue inside and outside of South Korea. The U.S. says it could better defend South Korea against North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear programs. China and Russia have both expressed strong opposition, claiming it would threaten their national security and destabilize the region. The THAAD claims come as the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States are set to hold their annual security talks in Seoul on Monday. South Korea's defense ministry says THAAD will not be on the agenda. The Pentagon claimed to comment on whether THAAD will be discussed. It did, however, reject the Lockheed Martin officials' claims that the two allies were already holding talks on the system's deployment on the Korean peninsula. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
U.S. fighter jets were scrambled on Tuesday after 2 Russian bombers were detected near a U.S. aircraft carrier in international waters off the Korean peninsula. According to the White House Thursday local time, 4 U.S. fighter jets escorted the Russian bombers away from the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, which was in the East Sea between Korea and Japan at the time. The incident comes amid heightened tensions surrounding Russia's intervention in Syria and its military annexation of Ukraine's Crimea last year. The White House says the encounter did not result in a significant confrontation. Amid controversy surrounding its indigenous fighter jet project, Korea's Embattled Defense Procurement Agency says it is feasible to localize production. At the Parliamentary Defense Committee meeting on Friday, the Defense Acquisition Program Administration said it is fully capable of manufacturing the new fleet of combat jets using homegrown technology. DAPA said 93 out of the 129 components needed for the Korean Fighter Experimental Project, or KFX, will utilize indigenous technology. The agency also assured the 4 core technologies that the U.S. refused to transfer can be obtained through offset deals or developed through cooperation with other countries. The Korean government plans to invest $16 billion to develop 120 combat jets by the year 2025. The Korean government's decision to implement a single government-authorized history textbook continues to be at the center of parliamentary bickering. During a budget committee meeting on Friday, lawmakers argued over the government's reserve fund worth about $3.8 million, which main opposition NPAD lawmakers claim will be spent on the history textbook project. The money was approved during the cabinet meeting following the government's announcement on the history textbook issue earlier this month. The Liberal Party said it is illegal for the government to allocate the budget without parliamentary approval and demanded details of the reserve fund be disclosed. Government officials rejected the demand, claiming a constitutional right to allocate about 1% of its annual budget to the reserve fund. The government added the details will be submitted to the Assembly by May of next year after execution of the fund. The National Assembly's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee will travel to North Korea early next month to visit the ruins of an ancient royal palace located in Kaesong near the Korean border. The committee members and selected government officials from the Ministry of Unification will visit the ruins of the Manwoldae Palace on November 2nd, which made the UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2013. They plan to return to the south later in the day by bus after checking out the ancient palace and nearby excavation sites. Since 2007, the two Koreas have conducted joint excavations and research of the ruins in Kaesong, the ancient capital of the Goryeo dynasty, which lasted from the 10th to late 14th century. It is the first time that the Foreign and Unification Committee will visit North Korea during this assembly. The United Nations has released a report describing how North Korea makes vast sums of money off the blood, sweat, and tears of tens of thousands of its own people forced to work for a pittance overseas. Son Jung-in takes a closer look at the deeply disturbing system the regime is dependent on.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in North Korea, Marzuki Darusman, says more than 50,000 North Korean workers are working as modern-day slaves abroad to prop up the country's flagging economy with much-needed foreign currency. The workers are sent mainly to China and Russia, but also countries in Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia to work in the construction, mining, logging, and textile industries. Darusman described the appalling conditions the North Koreans have to work under. Not only they are underfed, they're also forced to work up to 20 hours almost every day for $150 a month or less. The North Korean regime is making up to $2.3 billion a year from their confiscated salaries. It provides the elite in Pyongyang with foreign currency that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise due to international sanctions that restrict North Korea's financial activities. The report comes as the international community is pushing for a renewed UN resolution that calls for tougher sanctions against the regime. According to sources at the UN, Japan and the European Union submitted a joint resolution to the UN General Assembly's Third Committee with the help of other interested parties, including South Korea and the US. The resolution is reported to be similar to one drafted last year, which urged the Security Council to refer the North Korean leadership to the International Criminal Court to face justice for human rights abuses. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Looking down south, Korea's industrial output picked up last month, raising hopes that the economy is on the recovery track. However, local manufacturers are unconvinced by these numbers as they remain pessimistic about domestic business conditions. Shin Se-min has the digits and more.
Korea's total industrial output spiked in September, expanding 2.4%, the largest growth in over 4 years. It's a gradual pickup from the MERS-hit economy as dampened domestic consumption has started to recover. Statistics Korea said Friday that the strong service sector, a major driver of the economy, grew 1.2% from the month before, moving up over 3.5% compared to the same period last year. Increased output in the retail sector, boosted by the Chuseok holiday in September, as well as a cut in consumption tax, contributed to the monthly gain. Production in the mining, manufacturing, gas and electricity industries grew nearly 2% on month, a huge leap from the mere 0.2% gain in August, as demand for semiconductors and automobiles increased. But despite this positive data, the Bank of Korea's monthly manufacturing sentiment survey showed little change among businesses, with the majority remaining pessimistic about conditions in November. The central bank said its business survey index for October rose to 71, up 3 points compared to the previous month, while its forecast for November stands at 70. The reading is still below the 100 mark, indicating that pessimists outnumber optimists. The Bank of Korea attributed the gloomy outlook to continued uncertainty about economic conditions weighing on the country's manufacturers. Experts say, however, that as there is no sign that global demand will pick up anytime soon, it's difficult to predict when the country's exports will take a turn for the better, further clouding prospects for local businesses. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea's top conglomerate Samsung Group has agreed to sell its chemical assets to Lotte Group. Our Kwon So-hwa tells us what the big deal is all about.
A win-win situation for Korea's largest and fifth largest conglomerates. That's what Samsung Group and Lotte Group are hoping for after Lotte agreed to take over Samsung's 3 chemical units. The big deal agreed on Friday involves Samsung SDI's chemical unit, of which Lotte Chemical will own a 90% stake, Samsung Fine Chemicals, which Lotte Chemical will acquire a little more than 31% of, and Samsung BP Chemicals. The deal is estimated to be worth around 3 trillion won, or roughly $2.6 billion. Lotte released a statement to announce the purchase, the largest acquisition in the group's history, and said it was about expanding the company's business portfolio and boosting high-value products. For Samsung, the sell-off should give the group more room to focus on its key businesses, especially the IT sector. The agreement is part of the family-owned group's latest restructuring efforts, completing the sell-off of its entire chemicals business. Last year, it sold off its 4 major defense and chemical affiliates to another Korean conglomerate, Hanwha Group. Meanwhile, Lotte Group revealed Friday that its chairman, Shin Dong-bin, proposed the deal to Samsung's vice chairman Lee Jae-yong in July. According to insiders, Shin and Lee maintain a good friendship despite their 13-year age difference. The deal is expected to be finalized within the first half of next year. Lotte Group says it'll open a new entity in February and promised that no Samsung employees will be fired in the acquisition process. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Employees of Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering Company have expressed their anxiety over the announcement by creditors that 3,000 employees will be terminated as part of cost-cutting efforts. The decision comes after creditors of DSME decided to pour nearly $4 billion to help right the ailing shipbuilder. The cash injection is a comprehensive plan by the main creditor Korea Development Bank and others to rescue the troubled shipbuilder. DSME, the world's top shipbuilder based on order backlogs, faced a major crisis this year due to a downturn in the overall shipbuilding sectors. China's decades-old one-child policy seemed like a good idea some 3 decades ago. Presently, it is responsible partly for shrinking the labor force due to low birth rates and an aging population, which is why their government is finally changing this policy. Kim Min-jing takes a look at the implications.
China's roughly 90 million couples will now have the right to have 2 children. Once the policy takes effect, it's estimated that an average of about 5 million new babies will be born every year. Considering that China is already the world's most populated country, will this ignite a population boom? Demographers believe it will not have a significant impact on the birth rate and that the effects of the policy will only start to show after a decade. This could be the case as many Chinese couples have been hesitant to have children in the first place.
Considering my job is really hectic and my child is still young, we were never planning to have a second baby. So this new two-child policy doesn't really affect me.
There's immense financial pressure, and we haven't repaid our mortgage. The expense of raising one child is enough of a challenge already.
Experts also question whether the new policy will give China's ailing economy the boost hoped for by the government. This as it will take years for babies to enter the workforce, and there's additional implications as well.
They can't just say, okay, you can have another one, and that's that, and people will. You've got to see if they're going to increase the quality of air, food safety. Raising a child in China is a very worrying proposition in today.
Critics say the adoption of the policy comes too late. Many couples refrained from having a second child under eased regulations in 2013, so it remains to be seen whether the policy will produce the desired effects in the future. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
That's it from us for now. Thank you for watching.